What's up, Canuck fans? Welcome to the Line Change, a Vancouver Canucks podcast, which is a proud presentation of DraftKings Sportsbook, as well as a proud member of the Hockey Podcast Network. Be sure to check out the network for your favorite podcast covering your favorite team at thehockeypodcastnetwork.com, the home of hockey podcasts, every team, everywhere. As we mentioned in our previous video, we're going to discuss 7 teams who have been linked to Elias Pettersson and what they could offer in a trade involving him. Remember what we said in our previous video, though? Pettersson holds all the cards. This article comes to us once again from the Daily Hive, and in particular, friend of the show and podcast, Trevor Beggs, who's also co-host of the Locked On Canucks podcast. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Elias Pettersson was once the future face of the franchise. Now he might be the guy who truly signals that the Vancouver Canucks are in a rebuild, if the team does trade him. Remember what we said? Keep that in mind. It's been nearly 24 months since Pettersson scored 13 goals in 14 games back in January of 2024. Since then, he has 36 goals in his last 151 games. Remember, this is a player who scored 39 goals during the 22-23 season, a year in which he registered 102 points. At this point, the one thing that might save him is a change of scenery. Of course, Pettersson holds the cards with his no-move clause, but it's certainly plausible that he would also entertain the idea of playing elsewhere based on how things have unfolded here in Vancouver in the last 24 months. If he does get moved, here are some teams that have been linked to him previously, some teams that you probably heard of, some teams that you probably not heard of. Now, before we talk about the teams and discuss more about this, I'd like to thank my main and primary sponsor, none other than DraftKings, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Never experienced the jaw-dropping moments that make hockey? Well, you can experience them all with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Missouri listeners, listen up. DraftKings Sportsbook is now live in the Show Me State. New customers, this one's for you. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN, that's code THPN, to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-9777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Pass-through per wager may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. This is a limited time offer. Copyright NHL 2025. All rights reserved. My secondary sponsor, none other than Gassy Jack Art, maker of this fine and amazing artwork you see right here in front of you, and you guys can check them out yourselves at gassyjackart.com. All right, let's dive into the teams right away. Starting off with, the Carolina Hurricanes. Long time and current rumored interest in Pettersson makes a ton of sense. This is a franchise that hasn't been able to get over the playoff hump. They've also shown a willingness to make bold moves, one of which was nearly trading for Pettersson back in 2024. Carolina has also an additional first-round pick in the 2028 draft, courtesy of Dallas, and a relatively strong prospect pool. The Canucks could also juice a Pettersson to Carolina return by taking on the contract of struggling center Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who has 5 years remaining on his $4.82 million annual cap hit. We have the Detroit Red Wings. Like Carolina, the Detroit Red Wings are one of the few playoff teams with the cap space to trade for Pettersson. Frank Cervelli recently mentioned the Wings as a team interested in his services. We also learned from Sportsnet Elliot Friedman that the Red Wings backed out of a Quinn Hughes trade because they couldn't sign him to an extension. Hey, at least there's cost certainty with Pettersson. If the Canucks could get a first-round pick, a prospect, and a roster player back for Pettersson, as some have suggested, could a trade be as simple as Detroit's first-round pick, one of Nate Danielson or Marco Kasper, and perhaps a roster player like Surrey BC's Michael Rasmussen? Number 3 on the list, we have the LA Kings. The Los Angeles Kings franchise icon Ante Kopitar is in his final NHL season. While Pettersson isn't prime Kopitar, he's currently better than the 38-year-old version of the Kings legend, depending on who you ask. Pettersson's wife, Caitlin, also spent 13 years living in LA. If the Kings do become a top suitor, it's easier to envision this deal in the offseason when Kopitar's $7 million cap hit comes off the books when he officially retires. LA doesn't have a deep prospect pool, but they do have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds of this year's draft, adding more ammunition to the idea that this could be potentially a draft day trade. Once again, if Pettersson is willing to move his no move clause. Number 4, we have the San Jose Sharks, a familiar trade partner as of recently with the Kiefer Sherwood trade. Could San Jose Sharks' Mike Grier swing another deal with the Canucks to bolster his rapidly ascending team? Outside of Macklin Celebrini, the Sharks do have question marks at center. Michael Misa is the future second-line pivot, but the 2025 second overall pick has also spent a lot of time in junior playing the wing, leaving that as an option for the Sharks if they do target Pettersson. Outside of him, the Sharks centers are Alex Wennberg, who they just signed to a extension, Ty Deleandra, and Zach Ostapchuk. Apologies if I mispronounce that. The Canucks were linked to 21-year-old center Philip Bystead before the Kiefer Sherwood trade. Could the Canucks snag him along with a first-round pick in a deal for Pettersson? You guys know how high I was on Bystead and how much I wanted him in that Sherwood deal. Perhaps they would be willing to do it with Pettersson. Number 5 is the Chicago Blackhawks. Whether it's Celebrini or Connor Bedard, you can envision Pettersson as a defensively responsible second-line pivot behind either young star. Patrick Johnston of the province alluded to this recently, and both teams have the cap space to absorb his contract, along with the draft capital and prospects to pull off a deal. Much like the Sharks, though, Chicago does have their second-line center of the future in Frank Nazar playing NHL games. They also just drafted Anton Frondel, 3rd overall in 2025. He would probably not be on the table when it comes to a Elias Pettersson trade. At least in my opinion, he wouldn't be. If a trade were to work, could the Canucks target a first-round pick plus one of Chicago's B-level prospects like Sasha Boisford, Oliver Moore, or Mason West? That's right. Sorry. The Ottawa Senators. Say what you want about Travis Green's tenure in Vancouver, but he did help Pettersson break out as an NHL star. He had the wherewithal to play him at center when some believed he'd be better suited to the wing. You can envision a reunion between Pettersson and Green working. Ottawa should also have the desire to make a splash, considering that they're falling behind in the Atlantic Division arms race. Their past interest in Pettersson was brought up recently by the fourth period's David Pagnotta. However, the Sens lack a first-round pick in this year's draft, and their prospect pool is pretty weak. And even with Claude Giroux on the back end of his career, the Sens have centers such as Tim Stützle, Dylan Cousins, Shane Pinto, and Ridley Greig. Any Pettersson trade would likely have to include one of Cousins, Pinto, or Greig, because honestly, I do not see, Timmy Stu being part of the trade. Coming back to the Canucks. And last but not least, the Utah Mammoth. The NHL's newest franchise was linked to Pettersson by Pagnotta. Unlike Ottawa, it's a bit easier to see Ottawa making the splash. Their franchise has been stockpiling assets for years, but they've been unable to get over the hump. They also have a lot of uncertainty down the middle with Logan Cooley injured and Nick Schmaltz a pending UFA. Other centers like Jack McBain and Kevin Stunland are depth guys, while Barrett Hayton has largely been disappointed after being selected 5th overall in 2018. It's probably unrealistic to see Utah part with top prospects such as Caleb Denoye or Tej Iginla, but they could move a guy like center Cole Bodine, 6'5" winger Daniil, but along with the draft pick, much like the Kings, a potential trade to Utah is easier to envision in the offseason once Utah's cap situation clears up and they figure out what to do with players like Schmaltz and Hayton. So with all that absorbed, now obviously looking at these teams, obviously the one that people have been talking about the most is the Carolina Hurricanes. I could actually see PD being a good fit for them. They're a fast-paced team, although PD would probably not be their first-line center, as they already have Sebastian Aho, so he'd likely slot in as their number 2 center. Maybe that might take a little bit of the pressure off of PD, but it also makes you wonder how that would look, having an $11.6 million player as your second-line center. Now, of course, there's absolutely no way that the Hurricanes are going to trade Aho for PD. There's absolutely no way they're going to do that. Or do a swap for swap. Now, of course, there's been talk about the Hurricanes wanting to move off of Kotkaniemi's contract. And you guys know that I've made my opinion quite clear on him and how I do not want him on this Canucks team, despite his age. And I don't know if the Canucks are even all that interested in Kotkaniemi anymore. Of course, if an Elias Pettersson trade were to happen, a center has to come back in the deal. I think we've made that pretty clear. A center has to come back. And I think the Canucks have made that pretty clear themselves. And I just don't like the idea of it being Kotkaniemi. I'd much rather it be maybe Stankoven, but even then, is that enough on a return for Pettersson? The Red Wings are quite interesting. In the article, it mentions the reasoning behind the Red Wings backing out of the Quinn Hughes sweepstakes is because they couldn't sign an extension. They couldn't get one guaranteed. At least with Pettersson, they don't have to worry about that. And they know that they have him locked up with term. We know the Canucks were interested in one of either Casper or Danielson when it came to the Quinn Hughes trade. I know they were trying to get one of those two guys, but, obviously Detroit, they rebuffed it because it probably likely had to do something to do with the extension. Could they get one of those players in a deal for Pettersson, plus a first-round pick and a roster player like it suggests in Michael Rasmussen? I do like Rasmussen, so that could be a possibility. They're not going to get fellow Swede Lucas Raymond in a deal. Detroit's not trading Raymond, so you can take him off the table. Detroit won't want to give him up. Plus, he's not a center. He's a winger. Although, I do admit, having a guy like Raymond would be pretty darn awesome, if I do say so myself. But it's not going to happen. I'm being realistic about that. Another interesting one is LA. They're about to lose Kopitar, as was mentioned in the article, and they would likely need someone to replace him. Some say that Byfield is that replacement, but he may take a bit more time, or he just might not be ready, depending on who you ask. Once again, the Canucks aren't going to get Byfield in a trade for Pettersson. Although I know some people have kind of brought up Byfield's name in a trade for Pettersson. LA is not going to do it. San Jose, they are also intriguing. As the Canucks, as we mentioned, did just trade Sherwood to the Sharks for a couple second-round picks and an AHL defenseman. Could the Sharks try and get Pettersson to bolster up this young and up-and-coming team? Yes, they have Michael Misa, who could very well be the team's next bona fide second-line center. But he, as was mentioned in the article, he's been playing wing as of late. So, when we talked about Philip Bysted, and his name particularly when it came to Sherwood, maybe the Sharks just weren't willing to give up Bysted for Sherwood. Could they get him for Pettersson? Who knows? Actually, fun little fact, I'm actually going to be on a Sharks podcast later today, and I'm going to ask them about that. See, would they be willing to have Bysted in a package for Elias Pettersson? And I'll let you know what they say. The last three teams are, of course, the Blackhawks, Senators, and the Mammoth. Blackhawks, as I mentioned, they have lots of B-level prospects the Canucks could target. I don't see a trade involving Nazar or even Frondell. Again, I just don't think those are two players that the Blackhawks would be willing to part for Pettersson. I could be wrong, but they can, as was mentioned, they can absorb Pettersson's contract, much like the Sharks can, as they have the cap space. Now, when it comes to the Senators, I'm a little iffy on this. Their prospect pool, as we mentioned, is pretty weak, and I don't see them trading Stützle, as we mentioned already. Maybe Cousins or even Pinto. I would be interested in a guy like Cousins or Pinto. Even maybe Grieg. Unlikely a trade involves one of the latter three, as we mentioned, as the article mentions. I'm not so sure about the Mammoth either. Cooley is likely not being moved, so you're not going to get Logan Cooley, as much as I would love to have a guy like Logan Cooley. But right now, he's obviously currently injured, which leaves Hayton and Schmaltz, the latter of whom is a pending UFA. I haven't really been impressed with Hayton. Obviously, he's been a little, disappointing for what he's become, considering he was, drafted so high in 2018, and he was drafted 5th, so he hasn't really panned out. He is still relatively young, so perhaps he could blossom late, kind of like how Kiefer Sherwood did. But you also mentioned McBain, Stenlund. They're both depth guys. Caleb Denoyer, at least I think that's how you pronounce his name. If I didn't pronounce it properly, I apologize. Likely is another untouchable, like I've mentioned with some of these teams already, a few untouchables. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Shout out and thank you to my sponsors once again, DraftKings and Gassy Jack Art. And also, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, be sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single video. While you're at it, go ahead and check out our official merchandise store. Right now, we're currently selling our 1-year anniversary collection because we are rapidly approaching our 1-year anniversary towards the end of February. It comes complete with our completely redesigned logo, both in blue and green, as well as our skate version of the logo. And I gotta say, those black hoodies with the skate logo look absolutely fire. The white ones do too. Go ahead, check it out. TheLineChangePodcast.threadless.com. We do have some sales going on, so go ahead and check those out as well. If you want to be part of the discussion and have more discussions such as this one, join our official Discord. There is a link to it in the description down below. It is completely free to join. You can also find us on social media and interact with us on social media. Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Blue Sky. We're everywhere. Feel free to give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. Speaking of platforms, if you prefer an audio version of this podcast, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. On Spotify, feel free to give us a follow, as well as rate and review us on either platform. It is of course, greatly appreciated, and it really helps out the podcast. Also, if you had a favorite episode on either platform, go ahead and download that episode so you can watch it anytime you want. Same thing with any other favorite episodes that you absolutely loved. Go ahead, download those. Those also will really help out the podcast as well. And as always, once again, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. And as always, go Canucks go.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.